All right, all right. It's time for reparations. This is Brother Jumoke Fetayi. I'm the host of the Reparations Now podcast. We're excited to bring you our next edition with an activist out of the Minnesota area. Lives and has done some really great work in moving the needle in terms of reparations in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, and at the statewide level as well. And so we ask you just to pause a minute before we get started, to subscribe to this show, like the show, share the show with your friends, families, and comrades in this movement. This work continues on despite what it may look like in the political world. This work on reparations will continue to persist no matter who is in the White House, no matter who is in the mayor of your city. This work is going to continue to go on until justice prevails. So we're happy to bring on our next guest, Brother Trahern Crews. Like I said, is doing some dynamic work in Minnesota. And brother, what we like people to do is just to tell people what you feel is important, that you want people to know about you in your introduction of yourself, as well as how you got connected to reparations movement. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all the work you've done over the years in the reparations work, and just on behalf of Black people in general. I'm Trahern Crews. I'm the founder, lead organizer of Black Lives Matter Minnesota. I got involved in reparations through, I would say, in this capacity through the Green Party of the United States. I got elected to be the chair of the Green Party of the United States Reparations Working Group, and was able to do and the goal was to get HR 40 passed, but I started doing some work at the grassroots level, and did a workshop at the Men by Men conference here in St. Paul at the Harding High School. Our St. Paul City Council person, Jane Prince, came to that workshop. She liked it. And then we went straight, instead of going straight to City Council, we put together like a petition or a letter of support and went and spoke to all the Black businesses in the area. We started a book club. And then eventually we got resolution 2177 passed unanimously by the St. Paul City Council. But while we were starting that book club, COVID-19 happened. And then that kind of made the case for us why reparations was so important. And the New England Journal of Medicine said if reparations were in place, that Black Americans would not have been impacted as severely as we were by COVID-19. Then as we kept going, George Floyd happened. And then for us here in St. Paul, our grassroots in BLM Minnesota chapter and the people that we were working with, instead of doing defund the police, we pushed forward with getting a reparations commission seated. But we were already doing that work before George Floyd happened, but it just kind of helped accelerate things. So those are kind of how I got involved to where we are right now.
All right. Yeah, so we want to unpack that because I was looking at your bio and I saw you had extensive work with the Green Party, and so and there's a lot of different things that you did, projects that you work on. So let's start. We'll start with, I guess, more recent, or let's start with the St. Paul Recovery at Reparations Commission, and then we'll bring in some of the other you've been doing.
So we on January 13th, 2021, the St. Paul City Council passed Resolution 2177 that apologized for holding Dred Scott military slavery at Fort Snelling, apologized for the destruction of the Rondo community via the I-94 freeway, and apologized for St. Paul's role in practicing institutional racism against its Black residents. It's also set up a limited term legislative advisory committee that created the permanent ordinance, which I believe is 218096, which is the St. Paul Recovery Act Community Reparations Commission that is charged with making short-term, medium, and long-term recommendations on how to close the racial wealth gap and build generational wealth for the American descendants of U.S. chattel slavery who reside in the city of St. Paul. So that's what the St. Paul Recovery Act is about. Was honored to be one of the chairs or steering one of the chairs of the Legislative Advisory Committee that created the permanent ordinance. And right now I'm the chair, along with our co-chair, Kulia Pringle, of our Permanent Reparations Commission.
Okay. So did I hear you say that that's a permanent commission?
Yes, I think we're one of a kind. So yeah, it changed up the statute codes, and we're a permanent reparations commission, which I think is really important because it gives us, it's urgent and we need reparations now, but we also do still need room to be creative and study and come up with best practices on reparations. So that permanent piece, I think, is really important and something that I think other commissions or task force across the country should look into. So that just because there's things that we don't know. I'm just through some of the local genealogy and things, we're just finding out there was here in St. Paul, there was a Black community on West 7th Street in the early 1800s. There was a early population in Minnesota, and I think in Western Minnesota that just has been recently uncovered. That goes back to the 1800s. So Black people have been in Minnesota for hundreds of years, and us having that permanency gives us time to unearth this new, some of the new information and then process it and be able to make proper recommendations on how to address the harm that has been caused by the city of St. Paul and even the state of Minnesota.
Yeah, that's profound. I think that is something that other commissions should consider. Definitely, that's really awesome that you all had that vision and insight to create it as a permanent commission. And hats off to you. That's a great accomplishment, brother. That's awesome. Yeah. So in terms of that I know you said you're the chair of that. So where are you at right now in terms of that commission? Have y'all made recommendations? Are y'all, what is the commission, doing research still, or where are you all in your process?
Well, we had actually got started a while for a little bit, almost like a year and a half. We were moving, pretty quick, and then we got started like a year and a half. So we just got the permanent commission just was seated in March. But since we've been seated, I think we've really got a lot done. We had the ordinance says that we have to each year, elect a chair. Then we had to create our bylaws, so we were able to do that both of those things. And then we also have to create a work plan, and so we were also able to create our work plan. And then some of the recommendations we will come from our work plan, and part of our work plan includes producing a harm report. And so from that harm report will help us make some of the recommendations. But we have made a recommendation of a budget request of $500,000, and we want to see, we're working to get that passed with the city council, and we're encouraging community members to call city council and tell them that you support that budget request, so that our commission can do what I think is some of the most important work in the city of St. Paul right now. We've also, that was one of our first recommendations, was a budget request. We know a lot of times a lot of commissions were being established, but they weren't having any funds to work with. And then I think within our work plan, there are certain recommendations that will be coming out of that work plan too, including I don't want to jump out too far ahead, so I won't say too much on that. But those are some of the recommendations that we're getting started with our harm report done and getting a budget situated too.
Those are two key things that we find throughout this process of local reparations, that is trying to figure out how to get it funded, as well as developing of a harm report. So you'll sound like y'all are on track.
Yes, sir.
So we were talking a little bit before the show, and you were sharing a little bit about your family and the community of Rondo that your family is from. Yes. Because when we talk about reparations and we talk about like some of the northern states supposedly that didn't have slavery, although we know that they may have benefited from slavery from people who participated in slavery, investing in cities and communities and colleges and stuff like that up north. So in terms of if you want to share more about Rondo specifically, and I'm imagining that some of the issues that you all want to address is around redlining and eminent domain and things like that, since you're not necessarily focused on the enslavement period. So what is some of the thoughts around the issues that you all are centering your reparations work around?
So I don't want to jump out too far in front of the issues that we're working on, but we are looking at doing a harm report. But what happened in Rondo was that a freeway was constructed. So again, according to Demos, the racial wealth gap, according to Demos, the Brookings Institute, and the Federal Reserve, the racial wealth gap is substantial and is driven by public policy decisions. Minnesota has the second biggest racial wealth gap in the country, and the racial wealth gap isn't Black people's fault. It's policy decision, and policy decisions are made by lawmakers and people from private institutions and public institutions. And in this instance, the government decided to run a highway through a neighborhood that was 80% Black. 80% of St. Paul's Black residents lived in Rondo, including my mother and other family members, and that displaced them. Also, once they were displaced, there were what we call Jim Crow laws or racial covenants. And then those racial covenants, according to a movie called Jim Crow of the North that talks about the origins of racial covenants being right here in Minnesota. And racial covenants would say if you're Black, you can't buy a house you can't buy certain houses. These deeds would have certain houses. So Black people in St. Paul and Minneapolis weren't able to buy houses in certain areas, even after being displaced. So that's kind of what happened in Rondo. Black people, hundreds of homes were destroyed, hundreds of businesses were destroyed. And then on top of that, those people had to deal with racial covenants and couldn't buy, no matter if they worked at Ford, no matter if they worked at Gillette, there were certain places that they had to buy houses in. In Minneapolis, Mayor Frey, a couple of years ago, he tweeted a map of Minneapolis and it said Negro slum. And that's where Black people would be encouraged to buy housing, or encouraged to live at. And so that was policy, and that policy is what created what we have today called the racial wealth gap and other disparities, whether it's in health disparities, housing disparities, banking disparities. It's all usually caused by public policy decisions, not decisions that Black people make at the dinner table.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I also know, go ahead.
We also have another bill that's called the Minnesota Migration Act, and we'll be working this legislative session to get that passed this in 2025. It's called the Minnesota Migration Act because our ancestors migrated from the South to the North to find a better life, but still found white supremacy, institutional racism, and the Duluth lynching and other atrocities that happened here to Black Americans. So that's our state level reparations bill, and we'll be working hard and advocating to get that passed this legislative session.
So that Migration Act is a reparations, calling for a reparations commission, or what is?
Yeah, it has. It's sponsored by. When it first was introduced, it was introduced by Representative John Thompson, and actually had a hearing the first year, but then it kind of stalled, and now it's sponsored by Representative Sandy Pappas and Representative Hussein. But we have a lot more support this legislative session. And we have an event December 10th, and we'll be talking about it more at the North Side Event Convention Center North Point Convention Center on Plymouth in North Minneapolis.
Yeah, and I don't know if if you all were aware of it or not, but December 10th is also International Human Rights Day.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you might want to, make some linkages there around that as well.
Definitely. Thanks for the heads up.
Sure.
Yep. And to answer more, it sets up a commission, but it also has $100 million attached to it, so that we can start addressing some of the immediate relief and programming, but still having that time to study and do research too.
All right. And so we talked about local and we've talked about the state. So let's talk about a little bit some of the work you've done with the church. You work with an agency called the Restorative Actions with the Presbyterian church that has been dispersing funds in the Black community. You share a little bit about that, how that came to be and your involvement with that.
I was honored to be able to be a part of or become a trustee. I met Jim Coombs. He actually presented at our reparations conference, BLM Minnesota Reparations Conference in February. And so they asked me to be one of the trustees. They learned about some of the work that I was doing here in St. Paul and just with the St. Paul Recovery Act and the Minnesota Migration Act. I've been able to become a trustee, and we kind of set up an ecosystem for how we want to distribute funds. But it's basically what Restorative Actions is an economic initiative for Black Americans, or what the term that they decided to use is Afro-Americans whose ancestors descend from U.S. chattel slavery, and distribute those funds to them. So we've been able to distribute, recently we've been able to distribute funds to Black organizations that are doing work that are in line with our ecosystem, whether it's some Black businesses. I know some organizations that are doing some farming work, and some others that are doing some work around reparations as far as archiving and things in the South. So we're looking forward to dispersing more funds, but we're also looking forward to getting new surrenders, or having, people who are in the church or outside the church going to Restorative Actions, and you can donate so that we can continue to fund more organizations.
So that is local though, local to.
No, actually, that's nationwide. We've been able to fund. I don't want to say who we funded, but we funded some organizations that are doing some great work in the South on reparations that is instrumental. And we've also been able to fund some organizations up here in the North that are doing. So it's nationwide.
Oh, okay.
You can go to restorativeactions.org, I believe. And if you click on application, the application's there, and you can, if you want to apply, you can apply. If you want to donate, you can donate. If you're a Black-led organization and your ancestors descend from U.S. chattel slavery, you can apply for a disbursement. If you want to support, you can also go there and donate too.
Okay. Cool.
And also I think there's up here in Minnesota, I think there's a lot of other churches and things that are getting into or looking at or supporting the reparations movement locally and nationally. And we think that we encourage the church to continue to do that.
Yeah. So are you familiar with the National Symposium that's going to be in Evanston? Are you going to be able to attend that?
Yes, sir. I'll be there. I got it's a tight date. We're both, actually, I think that's the date they're voting on our budget request here. So be there and then quickly get on my way to the symposium. Excited to network and be amongst. That's some of the most positive energy in the United States that you can be around.
Yeah.
And so I love attending the symposium and reparations conferences.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. We're talking about the National Symposium on Local and State Reparations, which will be held in Evanston December 4th through the 6th, coming up quickly. And I serve as a senior advisor to First Repair, the organization that's putting that on. And also work in the South with supporting the South region initiatives. And, so
First Repair doing great work in the United
yeah.
States.
So I see also that you did some work with was it the Black Foundation in Minnesota?
Yeah, the Black Foundation in Minnesota. So when I was had the chance to be one of the community builders, is how they called it. We were able to put together grants for Black organizations, similar to Restorative Actions, but a little different, because it included it was a little more wider, but it was a great learning process for Black people who are going into philanthropy or want to learn more about how philanthropic organizations work. And so we were able to distribute, I think close to $1 million that cycle. And there were some $50,000 distributions that we were able to make, and then some $10,000 distributions that we were able to make. And all of those organizations were doing great work. To me, I think I wish we could have dispersed 100,000 to all of them, because they were all doing great work. But it feels really, really, there's no better or more noble. One of the most noblest things you can do is to give money to Black people. And so being able to do that was like one of the greatest experiences ever. In what we're doing with Restorative Actions too. Really dispersing funds to Black people is really, really important. So
Yes.
it was a great learning experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're still doing, they still have, I think each year they bring on new cohorts to do it, so it keeps recycling. So they're doing great. Black Foundation Minnesota, they're doing great work like that. And then I think there's other initiatives like that here in Minnesota. So that's one thing about Minnesota. There's the reparations work, and then there's things like that in what we're doing with the church that are also dispersing funds to Black people. So
Was it? I don't want to be wrong here, but I think Vice President Walz was his church that he belonged to was discussing reparations. I think maybe a Lutheran church. I'm not sure.
I don't know if his president was. It may be the Lutheran Church. I know his Flanagan Lieutenant Governor Flanagan came and spoke to the Minnesota Council of Churches, and the Minnesota Council of Churches also done some work with them. Was just on a panel with their chair and vice chair of their Reparatory Justice program. And just like Restorative Actions, they have a African or Black American part that gives to Black people, and then they have a Native American component that gives to Native Americans, because those are kind of the foundational people who have a right to a justice claim in the United States as it pertains to reparations. So, but yet the Minnesota Council of Churches represents like 250 churches here in Minnesota, and they're also doing reparations work. And I think that's the Lieutenant Governor Flanagan belongs to one of those 250 churches. That's part of the Minnesota, that makes up the Minnesota Council of Churches.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I guess while we're talking about philanthropy and stuff, I saw a documentary some years ago about the Bush Foundation having conversations about reparations. One of the earliest from conversations I'm familiar with, where some was philanthropy was beginning to discuss reparations and making considerations around that. So you have you said you're familiar with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think right when we first started right after the St. Paul Recovery Act passed, I think that's when they announced their initiative of, I believe it was $100 million to address the racial wealth gap in the United States. And I think some of that funds have, made its way to certain organizations in Minnesota who are dispersing funds and so yeah, I think that's some of the work that I kind of know about. But yeah, Bush is doing a really great work around closing the racial wealth gap, and I'm honored to be a Bush 2024 fellow this year.
So what does that mean, being a Bush 2024 fellow? What does that mean?
It's given me resources to delve deeper into the work of reparations and just to better myself education-wise and things like that.
Okay. And I guess so, just for people who may not know for sure, we're referring to Bush. We're talking about Anheuser-Busch stuff. One person told me it's not really a beer company. What did he say that they are? That's a whole nother conversation. But anyway, he was talking about how, the process and anyway, I don't get into that. But yeah, just so people know that's what we're talking about.
So yeah, there was like 600 people in 3 different states that applied for the fellowship, and then there were 24 of us selected in 2024. So I think we had a good transformative group. A lot of people doing great things in that cohort this year.
Okay, great. And I know you said, I was thinking about making this little segue here. I was like, okay, he said it's a good, noble thing to give money to Black organizations. And I said, well, I was looking at your bio. I said, well, it's also a great and noble thing to put your hands in the dirt and help the community out. And I know you have some interest in urban agriculture. How's that link up with reparations?
So that's definitely another part of the fellowship that I'm delving into, is learning more about organic farming. And right now I'm also doing a farming project, and have been doing a farming project for a while, but doing a farming project with a church here, New Hope Baptist Church, where we do a community garden with them. But from the 1900 to 1997, Black Americans lost about 90% of our land at a time where we were like 14% of the farmers in the United States. Now we're down to about 1%, 2% of the farmers in the United States. And so that definitely, the loss of land, and then just dealing with food deserts and not having access to healthy foods, it's a really big part of reparations. And then the income for that, I think, is almost close to $1 billion or $500 million in real estate land loss. So that farming, and then even being able to, I was in Detroit not too long ago, and just to see, have Black people growing their own food and then connecting with grocery stores and things like that. So it's a big component of reparation and dealing with health and wealth for Black communities. And just having access to healthy food is important to our diets. And our diets affect, us having to go to the hospital, or diabetes, high blood pressure, all of that. And so those contribute to disparities by not having access to healthy foods, and being in communities where we're having to go to the corner store instead of being able to go somewhere where we can get fresh produce or fresh meat, the butcher, still having a butcher that you can go to right down the street.
Yeah, it is so important, the linkage that you made, in terms of land ownership and not just land ownership, but also farming the land specifically, because like you said, over over the century, we've lost quite a bit of land that we held onto at one point in the Black community. And so there is more and more people are working on securing land and as well as farming the land.
Exactly.
I think probably some of it has to do with I'm sure some of our ancestors, there was the stigma of white working on the land and not wanting to work on the land coming out of the enslavement period. But we do know that it's important to be able to feed ourselves and take care of ourselves, and it's just a whole different energy when you eat some food that came out the garden versus something that you bought in the grocery store that was grown hundreds of miles away and shipped and sat in the refrigerator for a while, then sat in the warehouse for another while, then sat on a truck for another while.
Exactly.
Sat in the grocery store for another while.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's the stigma, but then I also think, again, the racial wealth gap is caused by policy. So I think there were certain policies where our ancestors,
Sure.
They just sued the USDA lawsuit
Yes.
about discrimination. So not having
Yeah.
access to capital, land theft.
Yeah.
One thing, our chapter here, we were able to, part of leading on the George Floyd uprising that happened here when George Floyd was murdered by Derek Chauvin. But one thing, George Floyd, his auntie tells the story, Angela Harrelson, about in her book about their great grandfather Hillary Stewart, who was a slave, and then once he got his freedom, I think by the age of 21, he had amassed about 500 acres of land. But eventually, that land was stolen from them, and that's the story of a lot of Black Americans who were freed or came out of slavery with nothing, and then still was able to get land, was able to get housing, and then had to deal with land theft, or then dealing with the fact that during the lynching period, a lot of those close to 5,000 people who were lynched, most of them were Black business owners, and they were being lynched because they were because they were business owners. So, there's the stigma, but then there's also policy, and then people pushing back or causing harm when Black people are involved in collective uplift or upward mobility efforts.
Yeah, you're exactly right about that. I used to do some work with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, and so very familiar with the Black farmers and the Black farmers lawsuit, Pickford 1, Pickford 2. And you're right, it was public policy is really was the main reason though why we lost a lot of land, because a lot of time and they won those suits. It was determined that the government did not for a while. Actually, at one point they just shut down the department that dealt with Black issues and Black concerns and racism in the department, in the farming industry. And then a lot of times they also just didn't give them loans. Most farming is set up where you need upfront money for seed and capital, and then at the back end, once the crops come in, they pay it off. But they did not give a lot of the Black farmers. There was a different discrimination against the Black farmers in terms of getting those loans in a timely way.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So yeah, definitely public policy again. So we had mentioned earlier in the beginning that you have. I saw quite a bit of experience working with the Green Party. So what's up with that? Working with the Green Party.
I was able to. I was first working on Marcus Walker's campaign. He was running as a Democrat. Good friend Lena Buggs was also running on his campaign, so I met her there. And then she decided. I think she joined the Green Party shortly after that, and decided to run for Minnesota State, for the Minnesota State House. And then she asked me to be her campaign manager. Prior to that, I was doing music stuff and working on, having a record label and stuff like that. But those skills, basically, I just transferred the skills that I was using to for the record label, and just use that for the guerrilla marketing campaigns we would do for political campaigns. And so that's through her, that's how I got connected with the Green Party, eventually was able to become a spokesperson for the St. Paul chapter of the Green Party, then eventually found out that there was a Black caucus, and then I got elected to be the chair of the Black caucus and then the chair of its reparations working group. And then eventually I got elected to be chair of the whole Green Party of the United States during the global uprising. Yeah, that was my experience with the Green Party. And I think when I was doing work with them, that we did get a lot done. I joined the Green Party because at the time it was the only party that had reparations as part of its party platform. So that part for me was a no-brainer.
Okay. So what's your take on the impact that say third-party politics has in this country and for reparations?
I think if it's organized and it's really speaking to and is able to do what it takes to break through to get into elections, I think third parties can be really, especially coming up in 2026 and 2028. I think the more we go, people are looking for more options on their ballot box, but they want to have something that they feel like can win, not just throwing away my vote. And I think that's the problem that third parties face, that just making sure that you're legitimate and that it's that the candidate that you're voting for has a legitimate chance to win. And a lot of that starts with ballot access, being able to get on the ballot in all the states, and then being able to, so sometimes you're on the ballot under the Green Party, but then you might be under the ballot under the Rainbow Party, so there's consistency throughout the United States with ballot access and those type of things, where you have block captains and where you're able to match the Democrat and Republican pound for pound as a third party candidate, so, but then also having somebody who reflects third party values too. So it's not like a hostile takeover of like a Democrat coming to take over the Green Party, or a Republican coming to take over somebody who's actually from the grassroots, or actually believes in grassroots democracy, actually believes in, defunding the military, actually believes in reparations, those type of the policies that the Green Party and other grassroots parties. And then I think, Bernie Sanders showed it, but then I think the discussion around PAC money and what that looks like, or how that works, because I know a lot of Green Party candidates aren't going to take PAC money, and then they're dependent on smaller donations. And so it just makes it harder to compete, and then being able to get the necessary airtime to get their message out too. So just I think a lot of it is structural issues.
So, I always feel like third party organizations should consider more focusing on, local initiatives, running someone for city council, and then running for a state rep seat, state senate seat, and then Congress, because if once, and I think it's possible, it's definitely possible, once, say, a third party has, like, say, 1/3 of Congress members in Congress, then now the Republicans and Democrats have to negotiate with them to get anything passed, unless they're going to negotiate with each other, right? but it makes it highly probable that the Democrats or Republicans could negotiate with that third party. But it has to bubble up. There has to be people in those seats at the local level, at the state level, because that's like really the launching pad to most people. A lot of people run from state house, state senate into running for their congressional seat. They're running for a congressional seat into the Senate seat. So
I definitely agree with that. I think it's just and I think we should see more of that. It's just, I think for the Green Party to get ballot access even in with the Senate or at the state, they have to run a presidential candidate every 4 years to make sure that, because you got to get petitions to get on the ballot.
mm-hmm.
And so if the Green Party gets a certain amount of votes in a presidential election, then they become a major party. Mm-hmm. And then then your candidates at the local level won't have to go out every year and get 500 signatures. They can just pay a fee. Like the Democrat Party doesn't have to pay a fee, doesn't have to go get signatures. They can if they want to, but they got the choice to where they can just go pay a fee and then they're on the ballot, as opposed to somebody in the Green Party has to go out, get thousands of signatures, sometimes in the 100-degree heat. Mm-hmm. You got 2 weeks to get like 2,000 signatures to get on the ballot. And so that's sometimes why they have to run a presidential candidate or things like that. But I definitely think there should be an intentional strategy and I'm not here to, instruct the third party candidates how to win, but there should be some intentional down ballot races. I think that's where the magic will happen for third party candidates and parties for sure.
Mm-hmm. I know you shared with me before we did this interview that and I wasn't consciously thinking about it, and then I realized and remembered that you said you wanted to talk around and police accountability and some of the work that you had done around that. And when I like I said, when I started thinking about it, I said, oh, wait a minute, that's what George Floyd was. That definitely was like ground zero for change in America, and the whole conversation. So many things jumped off as a result of that. Even some people say the reparations movement got a lot more popular as a result of that. And so you're right there, the heart of it there. So
it definitely gave us an international platform to talk about the reparations issue. We were able to let people know that we've had the U.S. government's knee on our neck for 400 years here in the United States, and that reparations was the demand going forward. And so, yeah, this was definitely the launching pad. The launching pad for, I think, really helped reparations gain traction after the murder of George Floyd. But also, we are the ground zero for the police accountability work, and we did. It was historic what was happening with Derek Chauvin. That was the first time like a white police officer in Minnesota was convicted or arrested even for killing a black person. 26, that was the biggest, right now it's still the biggest movement in U.S. history. 14 to 26 million people participated in BLM George Floyd protests in the summer of 2020 in the United States and across the world. And that's what became known as the racial reckoning. And that work that happened here in our chapter was one of the chapters who led on that. But we were able to do that, unfortunately, because of what was happening in Minnesota prior to that, because of what happened to Marcus Golden. That's our co-founder, Malik Kohler's Doty's nephew. He was killed by the St. Paul Police Department in 2015. And that's what made us start Black Lives Matter St. Paul, but which we now are Black Lives Matter Minnesota, or Cordell Handy, who was killed by the St. Paul Police Department, or Phil Quinn, or Jamar Clark, Travis Jordan, so many people here in Minnesota. Recently even after George Floyd, you had Amir Lott. We had Tekle Sumber. Just on last Friday, a man was just killed by the St. Paul Police Department. I know his dad. I want to send love and strength and power out to the Stowers family right now, who's dealing with their son was executed by the St. Paul Police Department on Friday. We know, and not condoning anything that he's ever done in the past, but the police should have, arrested him like they arrest white people who do crime. But this is definitely the fight for police accountability has been and is still going on right here in Minnesota. And Minneapolis has a federal consent decree, and they also have a state consent decree. And in the federal consent decree, it mentions Minnesota's racial wealth gap and how Hennepin County is the 5th worst place to live for Black people. And I think there's consent decrees in like New Orleans, and there's in other cities. And I think those alone make this case for reparations for Black Americans at the federal and at the state level. It says the Minneapolis Police Department discriminates against Black and Native Americans and people with disability. That's not me saying that. That's not some angry Black woman or Black person saying that. That's the federal government is saying that the city of Minneapolis does this, that it unjustly kills Black people. That's not us saying that. That's the federal government is saying this. And if the federal government is saying that, it's not just enough to say, hey, we're going to train you guys to be culturally sensitive, or you owe a debt for that because you've been doing this for a long time. So I think those consent decrees also are good. Sorry about that. But are good tools for us to use in our push for reparations at the state and federal level too.
Yeah, and I understand one of the things that you've worked on as well is getting making it mandatory that police officers have to get liability insurance.
We worked on that, but that hasn't passed yet. So we want the police to carry insurance like doctors carry insurance. They don't want bad drivers on the road. We don't want bad cops on the police force. We know that doctors have to have liability insurance. Roofers have to have liability insurance. Plumbers have to have liability insurance. And they're not carrying around guns and tasers and things. So we think that it would save taxpayers a lot of money, like George Floyd. I think his family, and they deserve it. They deserve more. Was the city of Minneapolis had to pay out $27 million to the family of George Floyd. But if Derek Chauvin had to have personal liability insurance, he had done that type of things to people before. Some of those killer cops wouldn't even be on the Minneapolis Police Department because they wouldn't be insurable. So that's one reason why we want police to carry their own personal liability insurance, so that taxpayers aren't on the hook for cops who are repeatedly involved in misconduct.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes sense. Mm-hmm.
We also want a database of killer cops. So like if somebody kills somebody or is involved in misconduct up here in Minnesota, that cop can't go down to Texas or something and cause havoc in a Black community down there like they've caused up here. Which was the case with Chauvin, right? He had done something similar. Well, there's a girl named, shout out to Zoe, not the name drop, but she, and I hope I'm saying her name right, she was actually, Chauvin had put her knee, and then city of Minneapolis had to just recently awarded her, I think, close to 8. Or she was awarded a nice substantial lawsuit, but he put his knee on her back, did that same thing to her, but she didn't die, but so yeah, he had been doing that to people for a long time. And some of these things, the Minneapolis Police Department, they thought that was okay until the community had to rise up and say, no, this isn't okay. You guys need to come with a different form of training. This is unacceptable. And then after that, we had Dante Wright. So and that's what we're saying. So with reparations, we talk about, and that's why I think police accountability is very important to the reparations movement, because we're talking about cessation or guarantees of non-repetition. So when we say stop killing us, hands up, don't shoot, that's guarantees of non-repetition. That's cessation right there. But after George Floyd in 2023, there's been more people killed by police than prior to George Floyd. That was one of the highest years on record in a long time. So, you know, when we say we ain't going back, we ain't going back, we really mean it. And we want our allies and our other friends to really mean that too when they say it.
Okay. Well, brother, I'm glad you brought that in, because it's very important, the whole cessation and non-repetition piece, because that is definitely you know, coming from the United Nations 5 forms of reparations, you know, making sure that you know, these crimes that continue to happen and these disparities that continue to happen end and don't happen even in the future.
Absolutely.
So, so we have to figure out what are those creative public policy measures that we have to put in place for that to be true.
Absolutely.
For us to realize that. So I am looking over my notes here. I'm thinking what I wanted to kind of do now is just really just let you give some closing remarks. So what do you think is important about the work that you've been doing on reparations? Where do you think the reparations movement is going now? And you know, like a call to action for those people who could get more involved in this movement.
I'm really excited about what we're doing with the St. Paul Recovery Act. I'm looking forward, really encouraged, and I know it's going to be a fight, but we really need to get this budget passed for 2025. Excited about what I believe is going to happen at the state level with the Minnesota Migration Act and getting that passed. And I think when we pass these reparations this legislation at the local level, it causes a side effect, and I think it makes other private institutions and other organizations start looking within at their policies and procedures too. So I think there's other impact that passing reparations policies at the local, state, and federal level will have. So I'm really excited about that, and also excited about some of the police accountability work that we have ahead, and excited about you know, just challenging white supremacy and institutional racism in all its forms, wherever it may preside.
All right. Yes. So yeah, I remember when George Floyd happened and there was a protest and stuff, and I remember you know, people starting to say stuff about structural racism. Then I remember people started saying stuff about defund the police. And I was like, okay, now we just need one more step and move them over to reparations.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
that actually has happened, and it's good. It's good to hear that. Thank you for this report. Thank you for the dynamic work that the Black Lives Matter has done, as it has, you know, gone through those different evolutions to come to land squarely on reparations. And so we really appreciate you, brother. Appreciate the work that you have been doing there.
And thank you guys for paving the way for us, and all the work you've done over the years and the work you continue to do right now. And we look forward to continue to work with you to get this done in our lifetime.
Yes. All right. So you have been listening to another edition of the Reparations Now podcast with our special guest, Trahern Crews, who's been doing some dynamic work in the St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota area around coming up with a permanent reparations commission. How about that? So we ask you to share this video, like this video, leave comments on this video, positive comments, leave comments. And I want to thank my engineer, Brother Major, for doing the background work to keeping us effective in doing this, bringing this show to you. And as we close out, always. And also, one little note I meant to mention, I was like, wait a minute, our lead song comes out of Minnesota and St. Paul with Gary Hines and Sounds of Blackness. That's their home. All right. So reparations now, reparations now, reparations now.